Ladies and gentlemen, One Piece chapter 1112 is out after a 3-week break. We've got a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump straight into this one. So first things first, I would like to talk about something that I actually got wrong a few chapters ago with the Vice Admiral introductions that Oda was kind of spending a lot of panel time with his chapter pages. You know, he was kind of just putting Vice Admirals in for no reason, or at least what I thought was no reason. And it turns out, like I said, perhaps these will turn into Straw Hat matchups, or they're being introduced for a reason. And if they do become that, I'll eat my word and take it back. And this chapter absolutely provided that. We see Frankie taking out a Vice Admiral, even Bonnie getting a piece in. This is just exactly what I wanted. If you're gonna take the time to introduce these characters and have them take up panel space, you need a purpose for them, and you just need them to fulfill something in the story. And we actually got that, which I feel like sometimes Oda introduces characters just to introduce them because he likes that. But to see Frankie, especially Frankie, who's a Straw Hat who we've been following for a long time, actually do some damage to a Vice Admiral was a very good feeling. So I think I can forgive those Vice Admiral introductions for now. I think I'm a little more satisfied than I was back then when we were in the middle of a climax of a fight and then Oda's just taking the time to introduce Vice Admirals. It's paid off, so, that one's on me. The next thing that I want to talk about is the conversation between York and Mars. I think there's a lot of little treasure troves of information in this conversation that not many people are talking about that I kind of have some theories about, so I kind of want to just talk about them. First is York talking about why certain parts of the lab can't be destroyed. Obviously because it'll, like she says, if you damage any of those, it'll result in an explosion. I didn't really understand why that would be such a big deal at first. They're destroying the island with a buster call anyway. What's the big deal if the lab is exploded? But then I remembered back when this attack was first beginning, York had something to, she was saying something about the lab cannot be destroyed because of some kind of purpose, or there's one room you cannot destroy. Makes me feel like it's almost confirming the necessity of Egghead Labs for something like the Mother Flame or some kind of government weapon that had to do with the destruction of Lelugia, because those chapters kind of came back to back, these two chapters I'm talking about. So I think that kind of drives that point home. But what was more interesting to me was their conversation afterwards, where York says, "Of course I know exactly how to stop this. Besides, we don't want to rack up any more sins." And then we cut to Mars, who is very surprised that she's even saying this. I kind of went over this at first and just brushed it away, but I actually think this has some kind of more deep meaning that a lot of people aren't really talking about, especially that we're getting an entire panel here dedicated to Mars's reaction just to York saying the word sins. I think that's very important and shouldn't be overlooked. Now, my initial thought here is that there's some kind of culture within the Celestial Dragons or within the Gorosei that this word sins has a meaning, right? Because we know York, her primary goal is to become a Celestial Dragon, and like she literally says this chapter, she wants to hang out with the Celestial Dragons and the Gorosei. So she wouldn't be saying this sins word, and it wouldn't elicit such a reaction unless it had such an important meaning to the culture of the Gorosei. So as to what that word means and what it is in their culture, I can only guess, because we've only gotten one context clue, and that is Mars's reaction. My guess, this is a stretch, but I know a lot of people have been talking about how there's kind of parallels between Vegapunk and his satellites, and potentially Emu and the Gorosei being Emu's satellites, parts of Emu that are a reflection or an extension of Emu as kind of proxies. I think there's been a lot of emphasis on the eyes of the Gorosei this arc. We see a lot of zoom in up into their eyes, right? We also had conversations with Mars saying he can't do certain things to Rob Lucci, right? What I'm trying to get at here is it all makes me feel like Emu is watching. Somehow through the Gorosei, whether it's because they are part of the Gorosei or because Emu has some kind of power to see through the Gorosei's eyes, Emu is watching. And the mention of the word sins here is eliciting this reaction from Mars, who is kind of freaked out that York would even say this, because Emu knows what that word means. And Mars is kind of determining, oh crap, she said this word, and Emu can hear us all right now, like, you shouldn't say that word right now, or like, how does she know about our culture? Is Emu gonna get mad at that? Something along those lines, right? I know I'm kind of going on a tangent right now, and it's a big stretch, but I do personally believe that there's some kind of connection here that has to do with the emu's relation to the Gorosei, the Gorosei's relation to York, and what sins means in their culture. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the most controversial part of this chapter. It's what everyone's talking about. Did Kaido get power cliffed with this red rock sequence? I personally have a bigger gripe with this sequence than just Kaido getting power cliffed, but let's talk about Kaido and all of that first, right? So, undoubtedly, it sits not great with me to see Kaido, or an attack that brought Kaido down, not take out the Gorosei. Why, you might ask? Let me go from a different standpoint. I understand why people would like this, right? And I partially like it as well, because it allows Luffy to now have another obstacle to overcome. It's hyping up the future villains of the story. There's some good things to come from this. What I don't like is that the Gorosei have, this arc, been treated sort of strange. They have an imposing presence in the fact that they regenerate and they're throwing this island into chaos, but they're also a little goofy. They're getting kind of tossed around a little bit. Stuff you wouldn't see people like Kaido like fall victim to. So to see Warcury just tank this red rock kind of gives me like this mixed feeling of like, if this is an attack that hurt Kaido and it's not hurting Warcury, yet I'm not getting the same feeling I got from Kaido from Warcury, right? Like that, like, oh my god, this guy is crazy feeling. I'm just not getting it. Something is missing, and that's one of the things that makes me a little upset about this sequence. I'm gonna try and look at the positives of it. You know, we have something to look forward to. Like, Luffy has now something to overcome that he cannot damage, right? That's a plus. But again, let me loop back to what I said in the beginning. There's something about this sequence that makes me even more upset, and that is, I think I've said it like a million times recording these videos, where is the haki? Where is it? We are seeing Luffy understand, acknowledge, and realize that these are opponents who cannot be touched or damaged, right? It hurts to attack them. They're regenerating. What can we do about that? What should be the next step in our attacks when we realize that? Maybe, perhaps, using the ability you discovered last arc that allows you to hit somebody without touching them. You can use Conqueror's Haki to inflict massive damage on an opponent without touching them. Yet we still see Luffy fail to use this on an opponent who it very clearly needs to be used against. This is the main problem with this arc for me. Whether or not Luffy has been using it this whole time and Oda just isn't drawing the one significant indicator that it's happening, which is not touching, or he hasn't been using it. Both of these scenarios are bad. Oda not drawing it leaves too much interpretation for the audience to know whether or not it's being used when it's such a crucial ability, or if Luffy's not using it, it's a huge gap in the writing. It's such an important ability that seemingly uses less stamina than Gear 5. Why is that not the first step of progression for Luffy? Why is he jumping straight to Gear 5 and not using Conqueror's Haki? It boggles my mind. I know right now I'm coming across as a hater. Let me just say, I love this chapter. I love One Piece. I love Egghead. It is only because I love it so much I'm able to criticize it like this. But it does leave a kind of hole in my enjoyment to see Luffy, his hand go up in flames, which is something that literally happened against like Katakuri and Kaido. He then figured out how to solve that problem by not touching them, and then now one arc later he's back to his original woes. Like, that's kind of unfortunate. Maybe I get this question answered right. Oda sometimes does have an answer for my queries, but that's just what's kind of, weighing on my mind for this chapter at least. Next up, we have the horse Gorosei member. I always forget their names. Venus. Venus popping up where the Elbaf ship is right as we're about to escape. This is just an incredibly menacing panel, so I love the aura around this guy. I think he's accomplished his job the most amongst all the Gorosei, right? He's been the most competent, at least from what I feel like. But what I'm excited for is how the hell do we get out of this situation? We have characters who I really wouldn't consider on that level kind of stepping up to this Gorosei member. We have maybe Zoro or Sanji stepping into the fray here soon. It's just making me more excited for this next chapter to understand, I thought the main battle was going to be with Luffy and the Gorosei, and we're going to see the rest of the crew escape and kind of watch Luffy get on the ship last and then we go away. I was not expecting the Gorosei to pop up right where our exit point is, right? Like, he's infiltrated the backlines completely. That's really exciting for me. I'm really, that's the one piece that's not clicking. The one piece that's not clicking in my brain for the chapter is how the hell are we going to get past this guy to escape this island? Like, I genuinely have no idea. And lastly, of course, we have this last panel with Mars finding where the broadcast is for Vegapunk's broadcast that's about to go live to the world. There's a lot of confusion around this panel, right? The dialogue, it seems fortune did not favor you this time, Vegapunk, but then there's these bubble sound effects in the background. I'm not really sure what we're seeing here. My guess is that those sound effects are potentially Vegapunk's, brain, right? We know he cut off his brain for the satellites. Perhaps he's holding his brain here, and this is where, the base of operations is for the lab, and that's where the broadcast is coming from. Or it's something completely not that. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of confusion around this panel. I've seen a lot of people throw around different ideas, but one thing for certain is that we no longer have to wait for the next chapter, and we're probably going to get it answered then. So, 1113 is slated to be a banger. Until next time.